Department of Defense that we just mentioned. Congressman, thank you for joining me. I think Joe Rogan has a brilliant solution here, is to vote Republican. If you miss your country, if you miss having your freedoms and having your rights and having political power to wield for good and just ends, then maybe you should vote Republicans back into office. And I'm thankful for Republicans like you, Congressman, who are calling on the Secretary of Defense to reconsider these draconian, senseless, anti-science vaccine mandates because of the CDC's new guidance. Really, it's just their new narrative. But talk to me about this letter that you have co-signed onto.
Yeah, Barrymore put it together. A lot of us have been complaining rather loudly about the Department of Defense's policy. I mean, Addison, they're not reaching their recruiting goals in places that they've never not reached their recruiting goals. And it's because of what we've seen going on. And this is a big part of it. People have seen, look, you got people 17 years or so, and they're being thrown out of the military because they can read. And Addison, the more we find out, I mean, I just read a story this week about a Swedish study that was saying they had learned, their research, double-blind testing, had found some amazing results that actually the mRNA from two of the vaccines are going to the liver and then being rewritten into DNA. We don't know how bad the consequences of this, long-term consequences of the vaccines could be. We know we were told Johnson & Johnson was safe, and then it was pulled. We were told that Remdesivir was a great salvation, and then people not using that anymore. There are just so many things that were flat out wrong, and we've got, fortunately, people in the military that are intelligent and people that are looking at going into the unlike what John Kerry used to say, that are intelligent looking at going in, and it concerns them how you could spend so much time in the military and then say you've got to get the jab. Now that Swedish study had another finding that was weird, I thought, and I'm quoting, radioactivity was detected in most tissues around the injection site and the liver. Now, what the heck are we doing with radioactivity being injected into us from this thing? And then there was a German study I read last week that found disturbing elements are being found in the vaccines, things like cesium, cobalt, chromium, titanium, cerium, gadolinium, silicon. We don't even know what that is doing long-term to our bodies. So for the military, as all of this information starts coming out, that maybe we're better off taking a better look at the vaccines, the military's going whole hog and throwing people out. We've got, about 80,000 that I've seen in headlines so far, including reserves and active duty, that are being thrown out of the military when we're not even reaching recruiting goals. So it makes no sense. And of course, when you've got military leaders that say the biggest threat that the military has to prepare for is climate change, like those guys can actually change the climate, then it tells you a lot. When they're more concerned about your gender pronouns than they are saving lives and preventing our military from being killed in places like Afghanistan, when our military leaders got our people killed, including the president, then it explains why people are not signing up like they used to. And the last thing we need is to be throwing out people that are well-trained and able to think for themselves.
Yeah, and I'm seeing the Army is likely going to fall 19,000 soldiers short of their target for fiscal year 2022. And you bring up a great point. None of these soldiers should be mandated to get this vaccine. Not because mandating vaccines in the military, all the vaccines are bad and none of them should be mandated. Not because of that. But let's talk about this specific vaccine. Let's talk about how it just does not work. And what better example of the ineffectiveness of this vaccine than the Secretary of Defense himself, Lloyd Austin, who had pictures disgracing himself. He had the mask, he had the plastic shield over his face, and he's gotten COVID more than once. He's gotten COVID after being vaccinated, after being boosted. So he's a prime spokesperson for why we think that the military should not be mandating this nonsense.
Yeah. Well, when I was in the Army, they mandated flu shots.
Right.
But there were not the adverse effects that we've seen. And of course, when you have really serious adverse effects occur, and then as you point out, Addison, you're not having that good of success in preventing people from getting COVID, then it is a problem. And it reminds me of the report that Napoleon, suffering from syphilis, took a drug that they had found syphilis could not continue to grow through, and that was silver nitrate. And, there were some questions which may have contributed to his death, the silver nitrate or the syphilis. Now, those were some account, but it points out the issue. If your vaccine is causing more problems than it's solving, then maybe you shouldn't take the vaccine.
Right. And George Washington, even when he was back in his day, he mandated the smallpox vaccine for soldiers. And leftists will try to bring that up, be like, oh, George Washington, he mandated a vaccine. Well, yeah, let's talk about the substance. The smallpox were actually much more deadly than COVID-19 is. It posed a much greater risk to the troops. They were dying at a much higher rate than people were from COVID in America. And the smallpox vaccine actually worked. So there's a lot to that. But the bottom line is the COVID vaccine, first of all, it's become hyper-partisan, hyper-politicized. Second of all, it just does not work. It does not do what it set out to do. Third of all, the death rate for COVID does not justify mandating it on large swaths of the country. It's as simple as that. Congressman, before you go, I've got to get your thoughts on the Secret Service seizing this $286 million in fraud COVID-19 relief, because it seems to me that if that's just how much they seized, I'm wondering how much has gone unnoticed, how much money, how many tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars potentially have flown under the radar and fraudulently obtained COVID relief. What do you think about this?
Well, it's consistent with government giveaway programs, and Medicare is not even a giveaway program. It's paying for specific treatments. But we've had hearings about fraud in that program, the waste, fraud, and abuse. And one guy testified by video that he used to be a car thief, and then he found out instead of making thousands, he could make millions with fraudulent Medicare claims.
Wow.
And so he went into the Medicare fraud business. He's in prison now. But when the government's in the business of giving away massive amounts of money, there's going to be a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's why we need to be more careful about the government programs we have. But in the case of the pandemic and the shutdown and the PPP, maybe we'd be better off not having shutdowns ever again.
Yeah, I think that's probably the better approach. Instead of having to shut everyone down, force them out of their jobs, and then compensate them so that they can stay above water, maybe we should just let people keep working in the first place and keep our economy up and running. It's a bizarre thought. Congressman Louie Gohmert, thank you so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.